Hello. The Games Workshop teams behind Warhammer, 40k, and White Dwarf have changed and developed many times over the years, with many new talents bringing their unique contributions to the worlds and games that we love. My guest today is Warwick Kinrade, who joined the Games Workshop design team as an assistant developer for Warhammer Fantasy and 40k. He then took on a series of production and design roles across departments, including White Dwarf, Fnatic, and Forge World. In one of his largest projects at Games Workshop, Warwick was responsible for helping to create and design the Imperial Armour series. They have had an enormous impact on the background and business of Warhammer 40,000. We talked about Warwick's early gaming life, what it was like to work on those incredible Forge World books, and his other roles at Games Workshop. And we also explored just a little bit about his work today on historical war games. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with designer Warwick Kinrade. Unfortunately, Warwick and I did have some technical challenges during the recording of our interview, so there are some portions of this interview that are audio only. I haven't got any video at all, sadly. But the actual conversation itself is mostly clear and is fascinating, so I encourage you to stick with us. Warwick, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Jordan.
I like to start just by looking at your beginnings in the hobby. So what was really your first step?
Child of the 70s, like everybody else, it's Airfix models and Airfix and Britain's toy soldiers. That's what we played with on our bedroom floors. You know, we pushed them around. We made Airfix model aeroplanes. We tried to paint them. We daubed them, and that organically kind of developed into using rules to play those games rather than like rolling marbles at each other and things like that. You know, as we got older, we found a copy of a war game, a Grant set of rules in the library, and we started playing them. So that would be in about 1980, 1981, something like that. And we just sort of at the same time we started to discover Dungeons and Dragons as well. So a bunch of us and my sort of circle of school friends and stuff, we were all started to get into that. So they all kind of developed in the early 80s, where we just started, you know, playing with toy soldier games that were more organised and playing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. So yeah, that was naturally led on into sort of the whole world of role playing and wargaming.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, D&D and Airfix do seem to be such common elements of so many stories. It feels
I mean, I guess they were everywhere. I mean, certainly with Airfix, it was just everywhere, wasn't it? We bought them in our local newsagent. That was, you know, literally you could buy, you know, kits and the model and the soldier boxes and stuff in the newsagents. And it was only later, probably a year or so later, where we discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and then, you know, began to sort of migrate to actual gaming shops and stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember your first encounters with Games Workshop?
Games Workshop. Yeah, well, it was always a name that was around, because the original, because we used to get Military Modelling magazine. I'm saying we here because I've got an older brother and he did all of this.
Right.
So he was sort of 2 years older than me. So I was sort of following along from him. And he used to buy Military Modelling magazine in Smith's, and I think Games Workshop advertised in it. So because you'd read it, all of it, religiously, and go through every advert and look at where the shops were and all this kind of stuff. So I think if GW put adverts in there, or other people were advertising GW stuff,
right,
like the game stores were advertising stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that's where I first saw an advert for Warhammer.
Right. And
we decided that we should probably buy it because we were already Dungeons and Dragons players, and we thought, if we could do fantasy wargaming. We were already trying to play World War II and Napoleonics and stuff. So obviously we're all massive Tolkien geeks and fans as well. So we just thought, if we got that, we could just play the Lord of the Rings with on tabletop. It was a very ambitious plan for people who were sort of 11 or 12 years old.
So
But
did you pick up that? Was it the first edition or?
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So I bought the first edition. I think I may have bought it in Games of Liverpool, which was a games shop of some repute nowadays,
right.
and a place I have great nostalgia for. But all my extended family are Liverpudlians. My parents are both Scousers. And we used to go to Liverpool visiting family quite a lot, and every one of those trips required a trip to Games of Liverpool. So we always used to go. I can still do that walk quite easily from Lime Street Station down to where Games of Liverpool was, into the basement. And my mum, long-suffering mum, would just stand about for an hour while me and my brother went through everything we could find in Games of Liverpool, going magazines, Dungeons and Dragons supplements, models, everything, and we'd save up all our pocket money and birthday money and just spend it in Games of Liverpool about once a month or once every 6 weeks or so. So I think I bought my first edition Warhammer in Games of Liverpool, yeah, and we basically thought it was going to be a replacement for Dungeons and Dragons,
Right.
and we just played it like that. We just made up characters and fought monsters
Mm.
basically, which will be a very sort of basic, it's a troll. Here's a bunch of characters. We all fight it, and let's see who survives.
Right.
There was no real role playing involved in those days.
Sure. Yeah. So when did it become like? Did you move into collecting the proper armies and building
Yes,
forces?
yeah. So I mean, from the start, because we come from historical wargaming, we sort of always knew that you were supposed to collect an army, a force of stuff that was a sort of coherent army. So it wasn't a surprise to us when Forces of Fantasy came out.
Hmm.
We'd already sort of started on that. So I was collecting just a medieval army. Effectively, I had knights, archers, crossbowmen, a cannon. So I was instantly just like, oh, well, there is an army list for that. It's the Men of the West. It's the Proto-Empire army list, so we could do that. And my brother was already collecting his dwarf army. He'd started buying dwarf figures and stuff. So that just sort of codified what we were already trying to do.
Hmm.
But and there was 3 or 4 of us locally who were all sort of decided which army we were going to be, and everybody tried to collect that army.
Right.
So yeah, I've still got some of those very first miniatures we bought.
Yeah.
Still got the first paint job I ever tried on.
Amazing.
I know, which is truly horrific, but I keep it for pure nostalgia.
So when did it go from being a hobby to a prospective career?
Oh well, so I finished my university course in about 1994, 95. Don't know, so long ago now. And there just happened to be an advert in White Dwarf, and obviously been a long time White Dwarf reader. I think we'd started reading White Dwarf back in sort of number 40 or 50 or something. So, and we had a subscription. So there was an advert for an assistant games developer in White Dwarf. So it was a sort of very old-fashioned ways. I just sent my CV in.
Right.
I was just finished university, so I was literally, was going to have to look for a job. And so just fortuitous, really, they came that long at a time. I'd always written stuff, written adventures for D&D, scenarios for game. We'd always been doing that sort of stuff. So I just thought, well, it can it? So I just sent them the CV, and they sent me back a request to do some writing work, a sort of test pieces.
Right.
One for 40k, one for Warhammer, and to demonstrate my sort of knowledge of the backgrounds and knowledge of the rules and stuff like that. And of course, that was substantive, to be honest, because that was all we'd really been playing for years, was Warhammer and 40k. We'd become sort of, I mean, obviously we bought 40k when it came out. Was that 87 or 88?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, that came out. That sort of took over, really. We played that pretty much exclusively first edition, then Rogue Trade, and then second edition.
Right.
So I wrote 2 articles for them. One was a Warhammer piece, one was a 40k piece, like I said. And then they got back to me and said they'd like me to come for an interview. So I went to an interview to Nottingham. that was a intimidating experience because I suddenly had to go into a room and talk to Andy Chambers and Jervis and all the
Right.
people I've been reading about in White Dwarf for years, you know.
Right.
Did the interview. I think in the afternoon we played a game of 40k.
Right.
So a bunch of prospective games developers, Andy and Jervis, sort of said, "We want you to pick armies and play a game of 40k," and they just sort of stood around and watched.
Right.
And I guess, almost looking back now, I guess we played a game for a job. I don't think we gave it to the person who won, but we were allowed to pick our armies and pick
Right.
from the studio cabinet. It was great because all the miniatures that I'd seen in White Dwarf, I could suddenly go, "Oh, we get to play a game with all these."
Amazing.
Fantastically painted by the
Yeah.
heavy metal team and stuff. Um,
So was that
yeah,
like
so
testing your knowledge of the
I
game?
think it
And
must have been just a test of knowledge of your knowledge of the game. Like pick an army. Like
Hmm.
the guys I was playing against. There was three of us at the time, and two of them chose to be. I remember it very well. They chose to be Space Marines, Ultramarines. So I just picked an Orc army
Hmm.
and played with that. And to be fair, I'd played that battle a lot
Right.
because we had an Orc army between us. So I just picked an Orc army that I knew would just wipe the floor with this Space Marine army. So I guess it was just a sort of game experience and knowing the rules. So I didn't need to check the rules for an Orca shock attack gun. I knew what the Orca shock attack gun did,
Sure.
kind of thing. So we just played, and and the Orcs absolutely wiped the floor with them.
Right.
And then I went home on the train, and about a week later, they sent me a letter saying they'd like to offer me a job.
Amazing. That's great.
Yeah, I know. To which I was obviously delighted and kind of surprised. I was like, "Oh right, okay, I am going to go work for Games Workshop then, in the games design department." So there was two of us. They employed two of us as assistant games developers, we were called.
Right.
And I think the job was effectively to do anything that Andy Jervis, Rick, or Nigel Stillman didn't really want to do.
Right. Okay.
And to do one of the things we did a lot of was play testing because, of course,
Hmm.
it takes a lot of time, and Andy and Jervis can't do anything else while if they're playing a game of 40k.
Hmm.
So that was something that they could sort of give us, say drafts or of new rules for codexes or something, and say,
Right.
go away, play a game, come back and tell us what happened.
Right.
Or they could come over. So we'd come back, and there was me and a lad called Andy Kettlewell, who were the two assistant games developers, and we would effectively just, that was the time when I look back and thinking I was being paid to play 40k then. Yeah,
I mean,
on those days. An epic
how-
40,000 was the other thing they were working on.
right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, how scientific was that process then? Because are you accounting for the fact that obviously you two would have both known the rules really well, and like can you like make that part of the testing, or is it literally just like let's see if things are overpowered and see if there's
Yeah. It was more kind of like oh, how do you think that went? We've given you the stats for an Gargant or something in
right.
Epic. Like, play the. They would make specific. We wouldn't just play for fun. It would have to be
Sure.
like, and sometimes it would be like play 2 turns and call it a day.
Right.
Like, you're not, or reset and start again.
Mm.
And it wasn't always with sometimes if, Jervis or Andy or Nigel were free, they'd come and play against you. I remember like Nigel was working, I think, on the Lizard Man army book.
Right.
So I played quite a lot of games against the early Lizard Man against Nigel, just so so he was getting a feel for, how that army would work, and I would pick any army to fight against. Play against the Dark Elves, play against the Elves, play against the Empire.
Right.
So you needed a very broad kind of knowledge of all the armies and stuff.
Sure.
And then they would, then they would just take that feedback. I mean, I'm trying to remember. There was an incident I remember, and I tell people playing against Nigel where the Skaven just wrecked the Lizard Man because I cast the spell that was the virus spell.
Right.
That required a toughness test or something, and his old skink army like toughness 2 or something, and it's just
Right.
and like about skink unit after skink unit were just wiped out by one spell, and Nigel was like, "Oh, Yeah, right. Okay, so there is a spell in this game that will literally destroy your lizardman army in turn one before you've had a chance to do anything. So we need to do something about that.
Right. You were saying about so you've worked out that there's the spell that can wipe out all the skinks.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then the next morning, Nigel had come in and overnight, it's taken a skink model and sculpted a gas mask on it, and he put it on my desk for me. For me. And then that would cause some discussion because people would just sit around the table then going like, well, what can we do about this? Obviously, anyone who realizes this is just going to get this spell and destroy this army now. So it throws up things like that it's really kind of nitpicky detail within the game, within the rules and stuff. But, so yeah, I worked in the games development part as an assistant games developer for it was a year, and then I had to do working on White Dwarf,
Right.
which was more a production job, effectively. And what they really wanted us to do was to go around and get a feel for all these departments in Games Workshop. Well, I was supposed to do 6 months working in the shop as well, but Robin Jeeves stepped in and said I didn't have to do that. Actually, he said I'm not going to send you to retail. You can stay here. So I did
Right.
6 months working. 6 months working on as a sort of secondment to White Dwarf, and that's where I really started to learn how to do sort of desktop publishing and stuff like that, which I had a very basic idea of from my university days. But that was a kind of proper production job with deadlines and again, you were doing sort of photography and battle reports and just laying out articles and stuff. So yeah, and for 6 months, that was a very different working environment to working in games development.
Right.
And then after 6 months, we'll go back to games development.
That's really interesting then. So this is just a standard sort of program across GW at the time.
Yeah, I think it was a sort of trainee program looking for people who could come and work in various departments.
Right.
Certainly for the studio, because I think a couple of the guys who I interviewed with, they ended up working on the Citadel Journal, which was
Right.
based in Eastwood, and at that time was sort of the promotions arm of mail order, really, I think.
Right.
It was kind of a slightly anarchic, weird thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That I think it must have been Paul Sawyer was the editor of, and so a couple of them ended up doing production work and there, and it was So basically, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I assume it was to find people who were they could put into different slots if they needed a new member of White Dwarf.
Sure.
They could find you. Other people who joined the department, like Gav, he left White Dwarf and joined the game development department at the time. I think I replaced Gav on White Dwarf, actually.
Right.
Maybe it was Gav moved to games development and I went to do 6 months on White Dwarf. So long ago.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. So that's, how the first few years of working at Games Workshop were, really.
Sure, yeah. So it would have been that in that period that you would have been working on, because you're one of the credited assistant games developers on 40K third edition. So would that have been in the mix at that time as well?
Yeah. So we we moved from Castle Boulevard to the Lenton HQ.
Right.
So we had that sort of big upheaval, and then I think the first big project, which pretty much took everybody's in games development's time and effort, was the next edition of 40K.
Right.
It's a huge big deal basically there. And the way that worked was we were each given an army to be sort of in charge of and do a first army list for and play test with that army, so it became your area of expertise, as it were.
Right.
So I got given the Imperial Guard, and I was basically the go-to bloke for Imperial Guard. And I think like Andy Chambers was doing Space Marines, Jervis might have been doing something else, and Gav was doing Orcs or something. I can't remember exactly who had what, but I remember I was Imperial Guard. And then, so effectively, then I had to collect an Imperial Guard army paint it up and use it, and that became the playtest Imperial Guard army. But it was also a chance to sort of influence, like, what would you do with this army? How would you organize it? What kind of, and look at the stats and stuff. It wasn't like as a junior, as an assistant, you were getting any final say on anything, but you were, you come along and say, like, I think the Lean Enough tank's a bit rubbish at the moment. I wouldn't take it if I was playing in a game, and we need to look at this. It's I remember a long debate about whether the basilisk was open topped or not.
Right. Okay.
It was sort of surely it's half and half. It's half closed, half open. It's not the same as an up truck, is it? An up buggy.
Sure. I imagine there would have been plenty of those sort of weird edge case kind of things that come up and then do turn into a day's debate.
Yeah. Maybe not a day, but in the end, you can't win because the senior games developers are going to have their, James and Andy are going to have the final say anyway. Sure. So you can make your case. I tried hard that the basilisk wasn't open top, I think, but lost. Can't win that argument, and it's been probably open top ever since.
And then did you then go back to White Dwarf again?
No, then I went. They decided that they were starting. They started various other departments, and it was the Black Library,
right?
And the Black Library also took over the Citadel Journal.
Okay.
So they wanted people to work on the Citadel Journal. Of course, I could do the production work and do the written work, etc. Right. So I went down to the Black Library to assist with the Citadel Journal, and that ended up rolling up to also being a production job in the Black Library, effectively. And that was when that was just starting. So things like Inferno magazine were getting started up. The first comics were trying to be done. So it's slightly different, not as game orientated,
right?
But a lot more production work.
Sure, yeah. Was that?
But it was still interesting because you're talking to all the artists and stuff. So
sure, yeah. So I was curious. Did you enjoy that? Because it sounds like it would be quite different on a sort of day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I enjoyed most about that is really because all the freelance artists who were doing all the stuff would come in and out, and the freelance authors and stuff. So you could talk to them, and obviously, sometimes they were being briefed, and you could have your kind of your input into their brief and stuff. So that's where I first met, a lot of the artists who were doing the comics, who would eventually mostly get employed by Games Workshop in the art department. So people like Karl Kopinski ended up moving. They just offered them a job eventually.
Sure. Yeah.
And then from that, I don't know how long after, it can't have been that long, they decided that they were going to set up Fanatic.
Right.
And the Citadel Journal would be part of that, rather because it didn't really sit very well in the Black Library because it was gaming stuff rather than thing was. And so I went to work in the Fanatic department, and then Jervis came to take over that. So I was working for Jervis again, effectively.
Right.
And I was put in charge of the 40k side of that. So the magazines, I think they were quarterly. There was one for Necromunda, one for Battlefleet Gothic, one for name another 40k.
Epic had one as well.
Epic 40,000. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So there was 3 there, and I was just basically editing and putting together those 3 magazines.
Right. Okay. Great. Yeah. So was that? I imagine that was a mix then of the rules and the production for that kind of role.
Yes, yeah, that's it. This has always been my case, Joe, because I've been able to do it and learned to do it. And actually, I've been to art college, so I'm quite good at sort of graphic. I've always been quite artistically orientated like that.
Right.
Is you get given to do it because you can do it.
Sure.
It's not because you particularly want to do it. I don't mind doing it, actually. I quite enjoyed doing it. I don't mind it. But really, your passion is for writing rules. But I don't hate doing graphic design work. So you end up... So actually, a job where you do a bit of both is fine.
Right.
Because although the magazine production for Fanatic was a production job, we wrote a lot of that material that went into those magazines.
Sure.
It was kind of like... we'd take external submissions, but if there's not enough external submissions, then you have to do it yourself.
Right.
So, Jervis would obviously write some, and Jervis would write some of it, and then I would write some of it for 40k. So it was, and then after that, when Forge World decided to set up on a proper kind of footing and make an actual department out of Forge World, they wanted someone who could do books for there. So right. I moved from Fanatic to Forge World mainly because they offered me the chance to write about tanks.
Sure.
They said, "Do you want to write about tanks all day?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, because the start of Forge World, because they'd actually begun with these kind of really specialist pieces, like collector's pieces, weren't they? Like busts and all sorts of things that were not necessarily for actual gameplay.
No, yeah, it started off. It had a sort of slightly strange beginnings, I think. I think in that they didn't really know what it was to begin with, but they knew there was probably a market there for these things. So I seem to remember they did a great big sort of 30-centimeter tall Space Marine and
sure, big statue
busts, stuff, big statue kind of stuff like that. But then when they started getting a few conversion things, doing like new turrets for the tanks or like new weapon systems and stuff, I think they just sold much better. And it sort of went that. I mean, I'm not sure because I wasn't privy to that kind of stuff, but that was the side of it that grew rapidly, and it became a kind of, we'll do add-on stuff for the games for the kits. And from doing add-on kits, it grew into no, we'll just do whole new kits, like we'll just make whole vehicles, etc., and make up new stuff. So it sort of snowballed over those first few years. It was quite a small department to start with. There was just 4 or 5 of us really. The sculptors were all freelancers, so they weren't working in the actual building. They were just working at home and sending through their stuff as they did it. And then again, I was Forge World's publishing department effectively on my own. I'll write the books, make the rules, and then can you make the book and do everything.
Right, sure.
As one man.
Sure.
Except make the models, which I couldn't do. So well, I can, but not that good.
When you stepped over into the Forge World studio, what was it like at that time? Like, what was the scale of it?
It was just starting out. Right. So Forge World had been around maybe a year or so, but it was a very sort of 1-2 man band thing. Everything was done by the freelance sculptors, effectively, and I think a decision was made to turn it into a proper department and give it a proper go. So they hired on a load of those freelance sculptors hired on to be staff, right. And they set up a proper studio then, and they wanted to be able to do book support because we'd done a few Imperial Armour books, but they were as sort of rules for the Forge World models that have been made as a sort of way of getting them, some rules and some support for that model range out. But they were little softback freelance jobs, right. that I'd done effectively, written and done the production work and everything. So they decided that they wanted to continue that as well, to have the book and model combination effectively, because otherwise I think they find that models without rules for Games Workshop it's quite a difficult thing, quite a difficult sell. It's the expectation is we can play with this, right? We can, we want rules to be able to put them on the tabletop and stuff. So yeah, it was literally just starting out. They just hired on a guy to do the website, basically the website. Hired on, I can't remember, 3 or 4 sculptors to work full time. Sorted out a place where they could put them at, in the head office, and we were literally just setting up as a brand new department there.
Right. So do you remember had those like the softback Imperial Armour books done really well then? Had that sort of prompted the investment?
Yeah. I think they've done pretty well. I mean, I was working in the at Fanatic at the time, so and I'd done them as sort of freelance jobs, and I think they did either they'd done well or they'd really helped the model sales.
Right.
So, it helps that people could go like, oh, there's a variant turret for a Lehman Russ, and this is what it is, and this is what the gun is, and here's some rules for it. It always really struggled, and always did struggle to have a place amongst the sort of official 40k background and rules, and the sort of within the proper what people would today call canon, I guess. So. And there was always there was always a bit of resistance really from the studio about it, because other people were then creating new stuff for 40k, which was kind of their job. So it was still, there was sort of toes being stepped on slightly, I think, and, noses being put out of joint between people. Because we were really becoming another small studio. Yeah, sure. There wasn't many of us. I mean, we moved eventually when it expanded a bit. We moved to a building just over the road from Lenton, like an industrial unit. And I'm thinking, how many of us were in there when we started? I think there was 3 sculptors and me, so there's 4 of us in there, and then it grew to be maybe 5 or 6 sculptors and a couple of us doing book production. So probably, and I think even at its peak when I was there, it was no more than about 8 of us.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
But most of them obviously were sculpting, and in those days they were sculpting what I would consider actual sculpting. They weren't just doing CAD design. That came a bit later. They were physically making models. Sure. Out of plasticard and green stuff and bits and bobs.
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting, that relationship between the studios, I guess, because there was always that feel. It was kind of like the Citadel Journal back when that was around, and a bit of the Fanatic stuff, where it's like it's a from Games Workshop, but it's not as official as the main studio.
Yeah, of course. It's not. Yeah, it's all that kind of peripheral stuff. I mean, the journal was always more sort of fan created stuff.
Sure.
Wasn't it? It was a sort of outlet for people to, and I think people then understood that, with the journal, that it's very much a kind of use it if you want, if you like it, but none of this is, none of this is official. Don't turn up to a game and expect people to be able to do this. And I think one of the problems that all that the Imperial Armour stuff had and the Forgery rules, as it sort of sat uneasily somewhere between the two. It's like, can we use this? I know that we were told that it was, they weren't going to put it in White Dwarf,
right?
For various reasons, and some of that is sales stuff, because of course one of the issues, as if you're very popular, is that you become too popular to supply the demand that you've suddenly created, and that creates a whole more set of problems. So I think a bit wary about trying to get too big too fast. And I mean, it did well. I do believe that Forge World, and it added a lot to 40k, because we were going a lot, because we were a small studio. You're kind of going a lot faster with stuff in the main studio. I think it's a bit of a tanker. It's got projects. It's got long. It's got plans for a long time in advance. Everybody knows what the release cycle is, and whereas we were kind of making it up as we went along and just doing it on the hoof, and no greater plan than what should we make next.
Right. And then you moved. So on the book side, you did move from that almost index-esque kind of here's the stuff, the Imperial Armour that you can use. That then started to move more to a kind of narrative-led.
That was kind of a combination of two of us, really, because we did the first big Imperial Armour books, and they were just rules books, with some background, or what people would refer to as fluff.
Sure.
Which is irritating for those of us who actually write that fluff. Is it fluff? Oh, right, okay, yeah. It has derogatory implications.
Sure, the flavour text, or
the flavour text, the stuff that's kind of you're trying to world build. You're trying to give it, give it character, make it fit in, just make it,
I think it's said with love. The
okay. Some people love it. Other people just seem to go, oh, I ignore that. I just look at the rules.
Sure, yeah.
but the problem was that is fine for 40k when we were doing Imperial stuff. There's a ton of Imperial Guard stuff we could do, Space Marine stuff, Inquisitor stuff, all the different, Sisters of Battle, all those different armies of the Imperium stuff. But we just couldn't fill a book with like Tau or Eldar, like of the same size.
Right.
We wanted to make these big they were really inspired by the sort of big expensive military history books, that you could buy on World War II. That's just got loads of pictures of German tanks in them and stuff like that. The stuff that we were into, some of us anyway. And I think it was more an idea. It was like, how can we create a book of similar size, of similar weight, but we've only got 8 models.
Sure. I mean, out of interest then, so is the reason you wouldn't do, or there was not an appetite to do like a full book of Eldar?
No.
Was that like because there's just not going to sell that many? Like if you've got that many variations and that many new vehicles, you're just not going to sell that many Eldar.
Yeah, exactly. You need enough stuff to make it worthwhile doing, don't you? And we might have made like 2 or 3 Eldar models. But that's you can't build a book around that.
Sure.
But then we had no other way of putting rules out for those things, because if it's like where would that sit then? Would we just put rules in the Citadel Journal, which was I'm not even sure if it was still going then.
Sure.
And it wasn't going to go in White Dwarf, and it's not going to go in the main Eldar Codex because it's not main range stuff. So we had to come up with a way, effectively, of being able to make books, and it also allowed us to put new Imperial stuff, which is always the most unpopular stuff, in with another faction. So we would just literally sit down and say, right, what faction should we do? Who's going to fight who? And let's create a war that we can write about. So and that was really my job, was to design wars that the Imperium could fight, and then, funnily enough, all this stuff that was models would be fighting in that war, and we could then, which allowed us obviously to do the photography for the models and show them off and do the rules, and then have the whole narrative. So the first one we did that was that the Tower one? I think that was the Imperial Armour 3.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, Imperial Armour 3 was the Tower in the desert.
Sure.
So I just sort of went, okay, let's. And another of those drivers that we never really got very far down this road, but I always enjoyed the idea of, and I think a lot of 40k players would have enjoyed the idea of, is combining all of the games. So there was Epic 40,000, Battlefleet Gothic, and 40k itself. And it's like, well, these all happen, so why couldn't we have a campaign book that's just got all of them in?
Yeah,
because it's all it's all one world, one battle. If you want to fight the big battles, you want to fight the small battles, you want to fight the space battles, let's just include all of it. And that had never been done before. That was never really been done before. So that was my idea. Was at the start of the Imperial Armour 3 was like, well, we'll make the Tau fleet ships for Battlefleet Gothic, which had never been done. And obviously that causes also, noses out of joint, because there's people in the studio who would like to do that,
right?
But haven't had the opportunity, or aren't going to get that opportunity, because it's not a plan that they're going to support Battlefleet Gothic anymore. So
sure, yeah.
Or if it was, it would be done in Fnatic. So maybe Fnatic made the models. Can't remember. But anyway. So Tau fleet models get made. Sure. Somebody made some Tau fleet models. It was like, well, let's put them in the book, and now we can do rules for Battlefleet Gothic for them in it. And that gradually, I think, basically 40k is just too big, and in the end, just 40k takes over, dominates everything, and nobody makes any models for any other game, because the ones that sell, or the ones that sell in certain numbers, are all the 40k models. So that's what you've got to work with. Because it's very much I always thought of it very much that the Forge World at the time was models led, in that the guys made cool stuff, and then I came along and made up rules and background and stuff. We'd had input in the construction phase, but the models were sort of leading the way. Let's just if we make cool stuff, people will buy it, and then we'll add it. So we're always wary about running ahead and just making up rules for stuff and then saying, like, oh, can we make a model for this because we've written rules for it? It was always the other way around. I always preferred that, to be honest, because as a game designer, it's much easier to have a model to look at and go, oh, it's got these guys. What guns have we put on it? But because we were a combined studio with just a few of us, and we were talking about it all day long, of course, those discussions were just endemic about, well, what gun should it have on it? What, could it have this? Could it have that? Model designers, remember, aren't often, or even ever, much 40k players.
Right.
They some of them play, but part of your job is to be a sort of specialist in the rules, so that they can come to and go like, what if I put this on? And you'd say, no, don't do that. Or yeah, it should probably have this, or other vehicles have these weapons on, so you should probably match up with that. It's like, you're making a little, if you're making a little Tau skimmer, do not put a rail gun on it.
Sure.
Kind of thing. So, so the models would lead the way. And then once we'd got a sort of big collection of models, or enough models, we'd sit down and think about, and the same that even then the models makers could have input into what might happen. It's like, anyone can have a good idea, was one of the things we used to say. So it was up to me to write the book, but I could talk to those guys and they were like, oh, what about if we included this? Or I've got an idea for this model. So what, and I've done some concept drawings for it. So what if we included one of these? And, and then a sort of book might take about 6 months. So you kind of have a plan, we're going to make this, this, and this. Like, say, when we were doing the Siege of Vax, it would we knew it was going to take ages to do a whole new Imperial Guard regiment and all their equipment and stuff. So you can't do it in one book's period. Right. So that's why it becomes multiple books, really, to give you the chance to keep making the models.
Right.
And give you that longer run.
Sure.
And then, obviously we sort of pick 2 Chaos Gods and then and make some stuff for that. So the good books were guiding the model creation at the same time. It's a sort of it's a virtuous circle. They're helping you, you're helping them, and hopefully between it all gets better. But yeah, the narrative thing really came about as a way of making books. Plus, it was like, well, military history is really my kind of passion, surprisingly enough. So it was really a chance for me to write sort of military history books, or 40k out of military history books, talk about wars that were ring fenced. So one of the things we decided from the start was that none of this stuff can affect the wider 40k universe or story, but it's a massive galaxy full of 1 million wars across it. So why can't we can just write about this war or what happened on this planet then, and we don't have to worry about the fact that wider timelines or all of it just ring fenced into one. So you're not trying to worry about like writing about stuff like this, like a Black Crusade that might change the history of 40k, as it were. So keeping it quite small and tight and ring fenced, so that not. And one of that things that allowed us to do with the models then is you can make wackier stuff, because you can say, well, no, this is just that planet at that time, isn't it? And you don't have to include it in all the rest of the universe, as it were.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you can be very specific then about what we do. So we'll write sort of orders of battle and stuff that's very specific to just this campaign.
Yeah, but that is actually one of the things that I think is one of the most sort of fondly remembered aspects of the Imperial Armour books, right? Because almost like you say, it's kind of it's similar approach to almost like an Osprey book or something like that, where it is, here is how it went down, here's the most important battles, here was the order of battle, here's who was involved, and yet you have all of these weird and wonderful one-off units that only happen to be present in that particular battle or that particular campaign.
Yeah, it's exactly that. The thing that we were looking at when we started was looking at World War II books, like what information's in them, Napoleonic campaigns, what information's in them, what the battles and stuff. But what I don't think anyone had really done before, and I don't really even think it had been done was turning those books into sort of gaming supplements. So there's a whole slew of rules or new army lists and stuff like that come with it. So you end up with this enormous tome which has got lots of information. 2 army lists, one side versus the other. which I was quite enjoyed, that we would have like, this is the army list for this Imperial Guard regiment on this planet at this time. We're not trying to rewrite the Imperial Guard Codex.
Yeah.
Which I think was the fear that some people thought was what we were actually trying to do. But it's like we can make a variant and sort of ring fence that in, and they fought against this Tau army, which is got this equipment and this, these new battle suits appear on this planet at this time and all that kind of stuff, which you can, if you want, take and run out into your wider games and play with in your tabletop. But really, it's about this campaign, and I always hoped or thought that people would like adopt that theme. If it's set on a desert planet, we'll just play on we'll have a desert terrain and we'll theme it to that, and we'll paint our Imperial Guard to match the desert, and we'll paint. Which is why we did all the colour schemes and everything. I mean, they were very common in World War II books, but there were all those colour plates and side-ons of all those things, which are just straight takes from things like Osprey books and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and it's fascinating to look back now and see that trajectory of Forge World as moving from we're just going to make a lot of cool stuff, like random collector stuff, then like amendments to your existing collection, kit bash stuff, and then it moves into this place of like historical wargaming, right? Increasingly so, and Horus Heresy becomes the huge sort of calling.
Yes, that was it. I mean, we knew it was always a kind of in the background that literally in the background of 40k and in the background out as we were working, that 40k has got its own history that you can go back and delve into. Now we were sort of writing new history, as it were, but we always thought, but wouldn't it be cool to be able to go back and do some of those? I mean, a million campaigns have been mentioned and things, even to just little headers that always. I remember when I was growing up in White Dwarf, it just say, here's the Space Marines and Land Raider from this campaign and the swamps of whatever, and you'd be thinking, I wonder what happened there. That sounds cool. And we were kind of going like, well, we could just start pinching things out of them, and we did, because quite a lot of us went all the way back to the start of 40k, so we could go back through that old stuff and just kind of go like, like the craft world that's in the Eldar book. I can't even remember what the title was anymore for the Eldar campaign. That is mentioned somewhere in an earlier epic. I think it might be in the first edition of Space Marine or in Adeptus Titanicus or something, but it's just a name.
Right.
But you kind of go like, and then you go like, nothing's ever been written about this. Like, I'm just going to, we can take that and run with that and expand it. That's what they'd done, a kind of great job early on with the creation of 40k, is they'd sort of started creating this world and made it seem massive. But there was little things like that where you could just go and go like, well, we'll just do that campaign, like is it the one where all the Space Marine Rebellion, where all the Space Marines fight each other pre-Horus Heresy? No, the book came out pre-Horus Heresy, but it's not. It's sort of up to date. I can't remember the name of the campaign. My 40k knowledge is failing me now. It's been a long time, Jordan. With Horan Blackheart.
Oh, it's not the Badab campaign.
Badab, the Badab. Yes, that's it. So that had just been mentioned a few times, and there'd been some cool schemes done for it, and it was just like, that sounds so cool. Like, what was that? Let's just write about it and sort of and make some models for it. And that was really, I think that is really a tester, because that is Space Marines fighting Space Marines, so it's kind of a pre-tester for Horus Heresy that was to come.
Sure.
Or in a sort of, Space Marines are popular, maybe if they just fought each other.
and that proved to be incredibly popular.
That would be popular, right? yeah, of course. But the Horus Heresy had always been right. I mean, I don't know if you remember when all of the histories of that came out. It was published in White Dwarf, wasn't it? Was some of it in the Lost and the Damned, or
yes,
all that kind of talking about that stuff. So it had all been sort of set up.
Yeah,
I imagine by Rick in the early days that had all been sort of set up, and everybody knew there was this huge civil war rift. So, and it was literally a kind of like, in which case at some point we should probably just break the glass on that, and how much stuff could we make for that, because it's like 10,000 years ago, new vehicles, new troops, all the old armor marks, all of that stuff, which had already been done, right? So that was just just fleshing it out.
Yeah, and giving people then, like, because it does feel like Forge World was increasingly appealing to like the historical war game, right? And you could
Yeah,
bring those people in because you are recreating something that actually happened, as it were.
yeah,
You got
exactly.
that sort of
That's it.
vibe.
You've got that kind of refighting these
Yeah,
battles from this time aspect to it, which I think that's probably just the influence of the several of us who were just military history fans and
sure.
historical, sort of came from historical wargaming as well as doing the sci-fi stuff.
Mm,
Is that this was kind of like, well, this is what we find cool, isn't it? To have this kind of proper battles for times and places with orders of battle and all this kind of stuff. That
sure. Yeah.
um,
Well, I'm interested then because you eventually then moved back into historical wargaming, right? So you took
yes,
that step back across from the sci-fi side
yeah. Well,
into
this is it. I
historical
really
stuff.
went on to what I'd probably define as my real, my real sort of passion, my real kind of drivers are.
Mm.
So instead of sort of trying to turn 40k into a historical war game, just went to go and make some. Let's go and write some historical war games. And part of the drive by that is, well, for one, if you write 40k, I think I wrote Imperial Armour books for about 10 years, and that's a lot of writing 40k rules, and that is all you're going to do. Sorry, cat. The You've broken my train of thought now, Cat. Yes,
It's normally me getting interrupted by the cat.
Yeah. It's my turn this time. She'll just come and stand on the keyboard.
Sure.
That's what I'm worried about. Is that you're never going to write while you're working at Games Workshop. 40k is so large that it's pretty much it's like Jupiter. It just sucks up all the gravity in the place, and that is pretty much what you're going to do. And you're not going to get to do anything else really. So it just becomes a sort of full time. And as a games designer, you're not going to design any games. If you understand, you're going to write supplements for a game that exists, and that game that exists is designed a certain way. For Games Workshop, they need it to be this game because so much of the company relies on it. It's the thing that's keeping everybody's paychecks coming in, and keeping this building heated and lit. So, and I wanted to make I wanted to write rules. Like a game, game rules, game mechanics, design, all that. I really loved that. I did get the opportunity. I did the Imperial Armour book, and that was a kind of, a complete outlier because it's a sort of one-off, to be able to actually write a game. Because at the time, there was 40k, there was Warhammer, and there was effectively nothing else. The secondary games had all effectively gone by then, and there was no plan to replace them. I guess the Lord of the Rings was around still.
Sure.
Anyway. But there's no demand for making games mechanics and stuff, which is another aspect of it that I really enjoy. Probably my favourite part of the whole thing is design and stuff. To do with dice and tables and how So to write my own war games, and the ones that I really wanted to write were historical war games, specifically World War II, because that's been a huge interest of mine for so long. We played in World War II war games, and I really wanted to make my own. But that not only is that really not going to happen at Games Workshop, that also can't happen while you work at Games Workshop because you're not going to be, your work contract does not allow you to write competitive stuff to what you work on. Obviously,
sure.
This, we pay you, they pay you for your ideas and your work here.
Yeah.
So that couldn't happen. And I really wanted to be able to do it. And plus, I've been in publishing for so long by then, writing books, making books, dealing with printers. I kind of felt that by then that I knew how to make books from scratch, from initial concept to final, here's a book you can sell on your shelf.
Yeah.
There was kind of no aspect of that I wasn't that I was uncomfortable with, and like, fine, I know how to do this. You know, I've been to printers. I know what printers need. I know what um, so having had that broad ground, because I wasn't just a writer, I was also always doing production stuff. Well, just meant that I thought, I can do this. I can do this myself. You know, I don't actually need anybody else.
Sure.
Because I had been doing it for Forge World for 10 years, pretty much on my own. There was more of us by the end, but when we started, it was pretty much just me. So it was really it was a chance to go and do what I really wanted to do. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I didn't. You know, that comes across wrong. Like, I enjoyed working on 40k, of course, who wouldn't? But there was a desire to be able to sort of branch out and do and write my World War II game and be able to go and do, and all the stuff that I read about, and periods of history, Napoleonics, and I had a big thing for the Crusades for a while, so I went and made a Crusades game, because I've read the books, collected the armies, painted the armies, and all that. Just kind of like, oh no, now I'm going to make the game to play with them.
What has that been like, sort of being on going from GW, the kind of leading miniature war game company, very specific type of miniature wargaming, but obviously massive, to then being an indie
developer? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, obviously, massive culture change, but it has, as you'll know, Jordan, being your own boss has massive advantages.
Sure.
Especially, I mean, at the time we had a young family and stuff, so the ability to be your own boss and just work from home, everything can revolve around your sort of domestics and stuff like that, has just made life so much easier then, rather than both of us being at workshop 9 to 5, and so. Yeah, it was a major change, but I've always really enjoyed it. Strangely enough, John, I don't have a problem being on my own. I quite like it. I imagine many wargamers could probably relate in a sort of. I quite like being left alone for 8 hours a day to get on with doing something I enjoy.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah,
the hours can fly by.
Yeah.
So yeah, that aspect of it I've always really enjoyed. Plus the fact that I don't need to start work till whenever I want to.
Sure.
And I finish work when I want to. And if I want to work till midnight on Sunday, I do. Yeah. Just because I'm feeling inspired. Yeah. I have found myself going through orders of battle for the Battle of Austerlitz at 2:00 in the morning on a Sunday, thinking this is work. And it's 2:00 on a Sunday morning. But it's different because you call it work, but you're not, because you're just interested in that. But I'm interested in this, so this is so it doesn't feel. It never felt like really feel like work.
Sure. Yeah.
Which might be the similar if you work for yourself and
oh yeah, I mean it's a rare privilege, isn't it, to be able to just to find yourself investigating or working on something that is something you love, and then it also happens to be beneficial for your work.
Yeah, exactly. You can I would not suggest it for many. It's not lucrative.
Sure, yeah, it has downsides. For sure.
Yeah, it has its ups. We've talked about the ups. There are some downs.
So what are you working on at the moment? Are there any projects that you're developing now?
Yeah. So I'm always working on many projects. So Battle Group is my World War II rules, and that's been going for I think 11 or 13 years. So the rules for that came out in 2012. That was one of my first big projects, really, when I was after, like, this is what I want to do, and so I'm working on supplements for that. Have been sort of yearly, constantly coming out over the years, which I've been writing. So there's always the next one of them. The Italy campaign is the one that I've been writing recently. Hopefully that should be out sometime this year. So yeah, there's always the next Battle Group book really in the series. We will run out of World War II eventually, though. Unfortunately, it didn't go on forever. Right. Yeah, we'll just be done. That's it. I've just done. So I released my Vietnam skirmish game. that was a kind of COVID project, really. I got inspired to do that, and then sat and did that all the way through the sort of lockdowns and stuff. So by the end of that, I had a Vietnam book, which I didn't do anything with till it was released the other month. So there's a supplement for that to come, which is what I've got. Really, this morning I was going to sit down and make a plan for what that supplement might be. Your cat's around.
Yeah, my cat's interrupted us now.
Then I'm also working on. So I have a series of historical war games called Soldiers of, and their various periods. I started with Soldiers of God, which is the Crusades period, and I've done Soldiers of Rome, which is early Imperial Rome, and Soldiers of Napoleon, which is all Napoleonics. And that's, of course, they've had supplements and stuff done as well. I'm working on the Revolutionary Wars, pre-Napoleon, Soldiers of Napoleon, Soldiers of not Napoleon, the Revolutionary War supplement for that, which is almost complete.
Right.
And the next Soldiers of book, I'd like to do a sort of full medieval game, which is Western, because Soldiers of God is specifically the Crusades. They're card-driven war games. That's a kind of thing that I've come to really enjoy myself, and so I generally just like the war games that I want to play. So I don't, it's like, if I'm not playing it, I'm not writing it. So I would like to do the card-driven version of that for just Western Europe, which is sort of 300 years of knights, 100 years war, Hussite wars, all the way up to the War of the Roses, really, and the end of the knights on horseback and period. So that is almost complete. I think I've got a first playtest game of that on Thursday, with my mates coming around to play that on Thursday. And hopefully, so that should be done shortly. I do those books with Griffin Beast, the historical guys. They're generally the sales retail outlet of it. So that's the third book, and then there is a vague plan, but hopefully we'll make it come up to do to take my Vietnam skirmish game and turn it into a World War II skirmish game that focuses on sort of commando operations, because it's skirmish stuff, very small scale commando raids and partisan operations, and basically behind enemy lines kind of stuff.
Sure.
That's a back burner. Hopefully we'll get to that maybe next year.
Right.
So yeah, there's always a ton of stuff.
That's a lot. Yeah,
there's a lot, and that is only small. And if you looked on my work in progress folder on my computer, there's about 6 other things as well. I've started writing a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Just
really?
I felt like it. Yeah. We started playing Call of Cthulhu again. I felt inspired. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wrote the first part of it and realised, this is going to take forever. so maybe at some later stage I might finish writing that. I would quite like to write some stuff. I've never written anything or published anything for a role play game, but
that's fun as well. Yeah.
But having been a lifelong role player, I kind of feel like at some point I would either like to write a role play game or write something for a role play game, like say Call of Cthulhu.
I imagine that would be a really interesting sort of, as someone who's developed so many different miniature-based games.
Yeah,
to then step over, and
that's what I found. But I mean, but when we were growing up, we always wrote. There wasn't that much stuff available for role-play games when we were growing up in the 80s. Obviously, there was. So we always wrote a lot of stuff ourselves anyway. But yeah, I think writing that it was a bit weird writing that first Call of Cthulhu adventure, because I was a bit like, oh yeah, this is not just battles.
Sure.
Generally, when you deal with nobody gives you the history for Call of Cthulhu, do they? So like, if you're going to write the Battle of Austerlitz, well, you sort of know what it is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Do your take on it, but it's already given to you what it is. But when you have to make it all up, so that's, I think, why it took so long. And I thought I probably should get on with doing something that's going to be an actual job rather than just a self-interested side project.
Sure.
I think it's a good idea, though. I will get back to it one day.
Yeah, well, that's fun. Yeah. Well, Warwick, I mean, it's been terrific to chat, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. For
Thanks a lot, sharing with us. I've enjoyed it. You come on and ask people to talk about themselves, and what a surprise!
Because everyone's got such interesting stories to tell.
I suppose. But who likes anything more than just talking about themselves?
Huge thank you to Warwick for his time and his reflections. It was a really fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate him sticking with me through those technical challenges. It was really great to talk, so thank you. If you would like to find out more about Warwick Kinrade's latest games and his most recent release, Soldiers of Napoleon, then you can do so by following the link in the description to his blog. There's loads of cool information about his work, and I really encourage it. And if you would like to support my work as a Warhammer historian, exploring the origins and evolutions of Games Workshop's greatest games, and speaking to the people who helped to create them, then you can do so by checking out my Patreon via the link in the description below. Thank you once again to Warwick. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.